This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This edition, this paragraph, this episode of Respectonomics is called The Parable of Connections. Now, by connections, we are referring to the ability, the willingness of one human being to connect with another. And the reason why we're using the word parable is because, in fact, there's an allegory. And that is the allegory of plumbing and the allegory of electricity. Both of those depend significantly on being connected. If you turn the tap on and the line is not connected, you don't get water. Same pretty much with electricity. We need these two to be connected to operate. Our bodies are, in fact, a very good example of the complexity of connectedness. So before we even look at the importance of connecting one human being with another, let's even take a look at our own bodies and our own lives. If you look at the fact that you are sitting down having a cup of coffee, think of the things that happen when you do that. You may have a cup of coffee, you may write some notes, you might scratch your knee, you might pat the dog, you might turn on a light, you might turn off the light. But all of these things all depend on the connectivity of one's body. So the connectivity of one's body, the way that it operates together, it's compacted, if you will, is a proxy on how we need to be able to connect with other people. It is complex, it is sensitive, it's emotional. The truth of the matter is, though, all parts of our being, just as much as we connect to ourselves, are the same parts that we need to connect with other people. The reason this connection is so important, I think a lot of us in today's world would say, well, I don't really need to be connected with other people. I can manage on my own. The reason for being connected to other people is it is our opportunity to dignify the other human being. It's very hard to dignify. In fact, I'm not even sure how one would do it. But if I believe in the concept of dignifying another human being, which is the root of Respectonomics, as you know, is to restore the dignity of the human being. My job, our job, is therefore to provide the dignity to that other human being, to give them their sense of value, their sense of worth, their sense of being included, their sense that they matter. I think it's very interesting, those corporate advertisements we see that say things like, because you matter. And I'm not actually sure that that really is the core of that relationship. The relationship that we want to demonstrate is that another person matters, and in order for that other person to be seen to be mattering, it's important for me to be connecting. And how we connect is part of this puzzle, is part of this discussion. When we all started in business, and I'm taking me back now to 1971, we all talked about connecting because connecting was the basis of building the business. If you wanted more customers, if you wanted to deepen the relationship with your customers, if you wanted to deepen the relationship with shareholders, suppliers, with employees, wherever your emphasis would be in your line of work, truth of the matter is that we needed to be able to connect. And in order to connect, we came out with a few approaches that we thought were probably and possibly were successful. The classic one was, and is to this day, that when you meet somebody, instead of saying, how are you, you say, how is your day going? Demonstrating an interest in that other person. I've said it before, and you've heard it, that when we ask this question of how is your day going, the responses are quite incredible. But one thing that does surprise me, and I'd like you to try this, is you say to somebody, how is your day going? And invariably the response I get is, it's going really well. And there's a big smile on the face, and it's very conjunctive, it's very enjoyable. And the reason I mention that is that I think we live in a world where we think in terms of people being angry and depressed and ticked off. I keep thinking that's the truth. But I also find that when I say to people, how is your day going? The paradox is people saying, I'm having a great day, thank you. The other part is this, though. When we engage with other people, and I'm going right back to the beginnings of business relationships, when we engage with people and we phone them up and we say we want to ask them something to recommend our product or service, we may want to ask a favor. But one of the great approaches is, and it's fascinating, it's never really asked, have you picked up the phone? And I'm not talking about one of those fake solicitations and promotions, but somebody calls you up and they launch immediately into, oh, we're doing this on Saturday and we thought you would like to be involved and can you spare time, money, whatever. And what's interesting about that is that the opening question to the individual on the phone, or even, in fact, meeting them on the street, should be, do you have a moment to speak to me now, please? And you get two answers. You get three, actually. One, of course, is, yes, I do have time now. But the second one is, yes, I've got all the time in the world, in which case your heart sinks because you realize you only wanted to have a 1-minute conversation and now you're into 30 minutes. But the third one is, the person says to you, yes, but just a moment, please. And the just a moment, please, can be something incredibly mundane. It could be boiling potatoes. And most of us wouldn't actually say, hey, I can't talk to you now, I'm boiling potatoes. So in fact, what we do is we get into that sort of refusal or rejection and we say, can't talk now, and hang up. Whereas when the question is asked, do you have a minute now to speak to me, please? It's interesting, the person says, yes, just a minute, does whatever they have to do mundanely, and the next thing you know, they're fully engaged with you and the conversation continues. What I really, though, want to talk about now is the parables of electricity and plumbing. You see, when we turn on the tap and water comes out, we really don't think about it very much. You turn on the light, you turn on your computer, you turn on your radio, whatever it is, you turn on your car. You don't really think very much about all the intricacies and all that goes into producing either the water or the hydro, the electricity. What is interesting is that when one of those isn't working, we throw a major wobbly. We have no water. We have no hydro. The hydro is out. The water isn't working. And it becomes full stations panicked. And it's so interesting that if we think about the sense of desolation or abdication, the exile that we feel when we don't have water or electricity, that is a very interesting proxy, a very good measure of what happens when we don't have connections with other human beings. We take those connections for granted. And what this is to do with is not only recognizing how to build the connections, but also to put ourselves in a place where we stop just taking them for granted. We take connections with another human being for granted. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. Then when we lose dignity of that relationship, both to them and, frankly, of ourselves. So, if we're going to look at this connectivity, and if we're going to use plumbing and electricity as our models or our templates, let's take a look at what's going on. The first one is that when you think of your turning on the tap, there's water pressure that comes into the house, and it might be from a well, it might be from the mains, it might be because you're on town water, wherever it is. But that you turn on the tap and the water comes out. And what is actually happening is that all the power that's available for that particular water coming out of the tap is bringing water to where it is needed. And that's the same with our human connections, that our human connections bring us to where the power is needed. The power may be to dignify the other person. It might be to dignify ourselves. But the truth is, when the power is focused, that is when the human connection will work very well. The other part to this puzzle is the electricity. Electricity, again, you turn it on and it works, but when it doesn't, we throw these wobblies. And again, the hydro, enormous generating facilities. You go and see these nuclear power plants and you see these major hydro generating stations and so on. And you think of all of those. And yet, at the very, very base level, I turn on the switch and the light comes on. At the very minor level, if you will, something that was enormously powerful has been brought to focus into something that I needed. It's a question not only of physicality, it's fascinating that it can be done, but it is also to recognize the enormous power and focus that come together that make our lives possible. And when we see the power and the focus coming together, that is a very good proxy on how we connect with another human being. We see the full power and the capacity of those relationships and how it can be used to bring focus into our lives and benefits and comfort. If you think about it, water and electricity make our lives very convenient and very enjoyable, and they do lots of wonderful things. So do human connections. They have the same power, the same authority, if you will, and the same sense of appreciation of what we can achieve. The power coming into our lives where we need brings another issue to the table, though. If you go into your shower and you turn the water on and it comes out nice and hot, which probably means the electricity was running as well, but you have the hot water. And as you bask in this flow of water, one of the things that we always know is we need an outlet. We need that water to be able to go somewhere. And it's an important issue that all kinds of power of water and electricity are in fact a two-way street. Yes, the water comes into the shower, but the water needs to be able to go out. If you look at electricity, have you noticed there are two cables? One is live and one is neutral. And those two cables represent the fact that there's a codependency, that power of water, that power of electricity comes available when both lines are involved, when we have both the input and the output. And when we have that is the same as our relationship with another human being. It is bicameral. It depends on the two of us. It depends on two cables. It depends on two people. It depends on power coming in and the ability for that water to go out. We need to be aware of this duality. But the other thing is that when we look at particularly in the plumbing parable, we look at the water that's going out, which we commonly call the wastewater. And we need to be very aware of the fact that in our relationships, there are some wonderful benefits. The hot water is a pretty good one. But there are also times in our relationships when we find the stuff that is in that relationship is in fact a waste, that it in fact no longer has a place in our lives, if you will. So we let that water out. And so it is also in our relationships. When the relationship has done well, there may be a time to let the wastewater out. We each need to determine, what do we mean by wastewater? Is it something we don't agree on? Is it something that where we just feel the relationship has melted away? Whatever that might be personally. And Respectonomics is very aware that these are personal relationships and that these relationships are such that we need to be able to dissect them personally and to see what is the good hot water and the good electricity that comes into our lives and the time when it's actually to be expended and, shall we say, going down the waste pipe. One of the things that you see in all connections in plumbing and electricity is where there's a joint, where there's a union, where there's two lines that are being brought together. I think this is one of the most powerful examples of our relationships with another human being. Many a year ago, a client came into my office. He was an electrician. And he came in with this, what looked like a sort of power switch box. It had a fuse in it and a great big black switch on it. But more importantly, it was in a terrible mess. It was burnt to a cinder. It was inoperative in every sense, and it was pretty horrible to look at. And as a matter of fact, it even had an odor to it of something that had burnt Bakelite probably. But the smell that it gave off was one of burn and something that had obviously gone very wrong. The reason he brought it in was to show me something, which was that it was a major switch. It was on a dryer or a washer, and the connections to it, the two cables, cable on one side, cable on the other, had not been properly secured. In other words, the connection was loose. And the result was that it started arcing. And because of the arcing that was taking place, two things happened. The most obvious was the power wasn't getting properly to where it was needed. But the most important part of it was it led to a major fire in the house. All because the connection wasn't properly made and tightened down. Therefore, in our human relationships, we need to be very cognizant, very aware of the need to tighten those relationships. I think it's personal how you do this, but I will put one comment to you and to me, and that is when we want to tighten up a relationship, it doesn't come by just sending masses of emails and masses of digital communication. It is a question of picking up the phone. It is a question of going to the door. It is a question of having, not a question, it's an issue of having physical connectivity. And the physical connectivity of looking at another person and being with another person is anthropological. It goes back to the beginnings of human time, where you had cave people. They may have been grunting at each other, but they were in communication. And we lose that communication, we lose that tight union, that tight connection that brings about the real flow of all the things that a human being can offer one to another. Sometimes, in our relationships, we feel that something has just gone wrong. You feel overwhelmed. You might feel that there's too many other things going on. And one of the great benefits is to be able to put the relationship on pause, P-A-U-S-E. And I spelled it out because my accent sounds like pause, as in P-A-W-S, in that you have on a dog. No, this is a pause. And pausing a relationship is a valuable technique. It doesn't mean we're cutting it off. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the other person or wrong with me or wrong with anything. It just is putting it on pause. We're very good at watching a movie on Netflix, and halfway through you decide you want to get a cup of coffee. And what do? We put Netflix on pause. And it is not an offense to Netflix. It's not to say it's a bad movie. As a matter of fact, it might be a way of saying, whoa, this is too good. I don't want to miss anything. So putting our relationships on pause is a way of reestablishing the relationship without getting ourselves into some kind of abrasiveness. It allows the relationship to flourish, really. And if you think about it in your own human life, our lives are all dependent on cycles. We talk about the lunar cycle, we talk about seasonal cycles, we talk about weather, we talk about all kinds of cycles in our lives. And one of them is, in fact, in our own body. It's our own heart, the heart that goes beep and the heart that then is at rest. There's every reason then to say, physiologically, a relationship with another human being may be usefully put on pause. It's cyclical, and it is also reasonable. And then, of course, we get into this, the nastiest of all, where the relationship breaks down. And I want to go back to your plumbing allegory here, or your electrical, whichever you choose. And sometimes there is a full-scale breakage in the system. I think we've all had those experiences. You've come home and you find out your basement is flooded. You find out that the electrical system has caused some terrible blowouts in some of your appliances. But when those things happen, there are two very serious consequences or happenings, if you will. And the first one is that we shut the power down. If you've got water pouring into the basement, the first thing you do is to go and find the main valve, the main source of water in your house, and you turn it off. And we need to do that in our relationships. We need to do it electrically speaking. You turn the power off. Is the hydro off? It's a clarion call when there's a problem. And when we have this kind of breakage, I want to emphasize something here that's critically important to our human relationships. Yes, we can bodily break a relationship. We see that, unfortunately, when two people go their separate ways. We see it mentally, do we not? Where people say, I cannot abide what you're saying, thinking, doing, you're not this, you're not that, and the relationship breaks down. So we see it in body and mind. And it is quite reasonable at that point to say, I am turning off the relationship. But there is one caveat, one caution, one red flare flying around us all. And that is, each one of us is made up of a body and of a mind and a soul. And the soul is, as we have said before, extraordinarily private, extraordinarily personal, and it belongs to you and mine belongs to me. The point of the matter is, we should never turn off our soul. Turn off the body, yes. Turn off the mind, yes. But turning off the soul takes us into a place of great darkness and affects all relationships with all people. Keeping the soul alive. And how do you keep the soul alive? The soul is dependent on food. Just like the body depends on food and the mind depends on food. And the soul depends on food, and that food, of course, is our faith. And faith is personal, and you will know which source of faith is important to you. But that is an area that we must never turn off, because when we turn that off, then we are discarding all of the abilities of a human, of the human being to be the consequence, to be the author of what we are intended for. I also want to say one other thing. When there's a breakage, and when we see the copper line has broken or the cables have come loose, there's a point at which we look at one another and ourselves. We go to the yellow pages or equivalent, or now we go to Google, and you go there to find out who is the professional plumber, who is the professional electrician. And you can call friends and say, whom would you recommend? The key is, though, that at that stage, we bring in the professional. We bring in someone who is capable of identifying the problem and fixing it safely and giving it a permanent solution. And that has one important dynamic to it. When our human relations do break down, there is a point to bring in the technical, to bring in the expert, to bring in the one who is experienced in these matters. We traditionally think in terms of therapists, we think in terms of counselors, but these people have an enormous value in bringing together the technical breakages in our lives that we can't actually do on our own. I don't think any of you would particularly want me to be fixing the plumbing in your house or the electrical supplies in your house. By the same token, we bring in the professional, and we bring in the professional when a relationship has been fractured. In Respectonomics, this whole adventure, this whole project, crusade, mission, started on the premise that we needed to see people respecting one another. And we broke it down into this body, mind, and soul concept. My original discussion was at the corporate level. And I want to conclude with this because at the corporate level, I believe a question that can be asked, and maybe not asked often enough, but a question that should be asked by the senior management, by people who are in the ability to manage and to coordinate other people's activities and interests, those individuals should be asking, how do we connect with our employees? How do we connect with our customers? How do we connect with our shareholders? How do we connect with our suppliers? How do we connect with the community? And unfortunately, that how question has become an excuse for let's ramp up our digital connectivity. In other words, we say we will send out more surveys, we'll send out more letters, we'll do more robotic telephone calls, digital, digital, digital. And digitalism is not humanism. Humanism requires you and me to be able to talk and to communicate one with another. And when that question is asked, how do we connect with, let's say, the employees, the answer is to be literally on the face page to find out what is it that connects well with an employee. And I'm not talking about a Christmas party. I'm not talking about a day at the beach. I'm talking about how do I connect with an employee? How? What is it that I need to do? What is it that I need to do to communicate, to coordinate, to be at harmony, if you will, with the shareholder or the supplier? There are many, many parts to an organization. And when we say, how do I connect? One of the important things is, if you go back to the parable of plumbing for a moment, you'll find out something very interesting. And that is the plumbing works throughout the entirety of your house, whether it's the shower, whether it's the coffee tap, whether it's the, I'm trying to think of the hose that goes to water your garden. They're all connected. And when one isn't working, it usually means the others aren't working. So this, how do I connect, is a very broadly based question that needs to reach into all aspects, all facets of an organization. Make a list of the shareholders, the customers, the suppliers, the people on duty at night, whatever it might be. It might be the people bringing the food in at night. Whatever it would be, the security guards. We need to keep asking ourselves, how do we connect with these human beings, with these individuals? And I'm not talking digital. I'd like to conclude with a Latin expression. You may have already picked up that I know my Latin and my Greek. And one of the most important things that we can do is to break bread with another human being. That is when we see that full neural, we see the full connectivity of a human being to a human being. Think of the times you've had in your life where you felt so connected with another. And so often it's happened over a plate of pasta. It might have happened at Tim Hortons. It can happen at many different places. But the breaking of the bread is a very great benefit. The Latin expression is panis fractus fructus, which means broken bread is our fruit. I think that this business of a human being connecting to another is a subject that we will explore and explore and explore. And I will welcome your comments and your ideas. I would like this message to be given broad distribution, because it's not the distribution that says we need to do this. It's a distribution that says let's all think about it and let's start putting into action how we can communicate, how we can be in connectivity, how we can be one human being to another in a way that we add the value to the other human being, because when we add value to another human being, when we add worth to another human being, it is axiomatic, it's an equation. We add value and we add worth into our very own lives. I rest my case.